Dear Athenians, I welcome you tonight we're here to welcome Chigozie Obioma to UGA. He is the Linear Chair in English, and his arrival in our town and in our department coincides with the appearance of his newest novel, The Road to the Country, of which I think I hold the second to last copy in my hands, so you can wrestle with me in the back for it while he reads. But I am very excited and grateful that Chigozie has decided to join our department in our creative writing program, and I'm very excited to see so many of our students and faculty members here. As you know, he was twice shortlisted for the Booker Prize, third time's a charm. I just goofed that. Third try is, how does that go? My parents are immigrants, I don't know. I eat dogs. Oops, I'm not supposed to say that. Ladies and gentlemen, I will stop now and introduce to you, welcome Chigozie Obioma. Thank you.
People are so generous here. I feel so much peace being in this place. I don't think I felt that before. It's really true. I'm not trying to flatter you, but so Mike just said that I accepted to come here. Who would say no? It's a big privilege. So I'm really grateful. I'm happy to be part of the, is it Bulldogs? You know what's funny? I hate football. I think it's quite violent. Well, maybe not hate, but it's just not a sport that I've gotten used to. But I've always been around it. I went to the University of Michigan where it was someone went there to get the Wolverines. And then Nebraska, which I started to do very badly. But football, the Huskers, football is still a big thing there. And then now I'm in the land of the champions. So anyway, thank you very much to the English department, the creative writing program, and everyone who has made this possible and this event as well. I truly deeply appreciate it. So I'm going to try to introduce you to The Road to the Country, which is my third novel. The interesting thing about writing fiction is that, at least for me, every time I engage with it, I learn new things. And when I say I learn new things, you might think it's just a thing or two, but a lot. So it's a constant re-education for me, which is why, in some ways, I feel like I'm writing the same novel all over again. But at the same time, they're very radically different from each other. So, but if you've read any of my books in the past, I'm sure no one here has, or maybe one or two people, my colleagues have, you will see that I'm interested in two things, mostly, in fiction. And they're quite simple. The first thing that drives my interest in fiction is what I term as the sort of psychological and emotional evolution in people. So I like to create a character or set of characters who start from one end of the psychological spectrum, and then I put them in situations where they change. So you have in The Fisherman, at the beginning of the novel, a brother of four other brothers who would kill for his brothers at the beginning of the novel. So the love and bond is so deep that by the mid section of the book, he hates them so much that he wants to kill them. So how do people change? How do people evolve in that way? It's very interesting to me. This book is the same. You have a shy, lowly university student who is trying to study law is yanked out of his education into a war he knows nothing about. In fact, he doesn't even know that the war is happening. So, but by the end of the novel, this guy is a battle-hardened soldier. And so that evolution again is something. So the second thing I'm interested in is what I like to joke of as my interest in doing the desk job of African literature. This is to say that I always try to find what I think are gaps in the canon of African literature in written form, so to speak. So which for me is quite young. So if you think of the first few novels in the English language, for instance, or in any written form, they are from the 50s, so, or 48, some would say. So there's a lot of gap then in that tradition. So I always would, for instance, my second novel, An Orchestra of Minorities, was born out of that. It wasn't the book I wanted to write. I was thinking of a different book entirely. And then I read John Milton's Paradise Lost, and it blew my mind. And I had a sort of an epiphany. I said to myself, this is a cosmological novel. Poem, not a novel. Because it takes the cosmological story of Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden thing, and turns it into an entire fictional prose poem. And I thought to myself, from West Africa, from Nigeria itself, I know two different cosmological traditions, the Igbo and Yoruba, and I cannot think of any cosmological novel in the African canon, and I decided to write one. I remember when I told a friend of mine, I'm going to write a novel in which the Chi, so if you look at my name, Chigozie, Chinua, so the evocation of the guiding spirit that the Igbo people believe is an index of every human being, a sort of index of divinity in everybody. I'm going to write a novel whose narrator is the spirit. The guy laughed at me. He was like, how would you even do that? So it was a difficult thing, but because I was determined to fill that hole or that gap, it took a lot of time to do the imaginative work. But at the end of the day, I came up with a novel narrated by this reincarnating 700-year-old spirit. And The Road to the Country follows the same attempt. So what happened, my first interest in the Biafran War of Independence was in 1993. So I was growing up in Akure in Nigeria, which is in the West. And so I was born in 86. For some of you who think I'm younger or older than that. So I was born in 86, but in 1993, Nigeria unraveled. I will give you a small history of Nigeria, a brief history later on, but essentially, growing up, there was a period of time when we had dictator after dictator, and I mean, not dictator in words, not a guy who says, I will be a dictator, no, actual dictators. So a sort of thing that was common, at least that I witnessed twice growing up, was we wake up around 4 a.m. and the radio, the transistor radio, is booming. A guttural voice comes on the radio. Hello, fellow Nigerians. I am General so-and-so. I am now the leader of the country. The constitution is hereby abolished. The parliament is revoked. And then he becomes the Lord. And when I mean the Lord, the next day you see like tanks, soldiers everywhere, martial law. So this was at least two different dictators, three actually, up until 1999. So that happened in 1991. This guy came in, he was quite ruthless. So he became this person whom in the international community began to try to, like at the US for instance, they were bullying him, get out of the way and allow for democracy to rule. But he wasn't interested in that. So, but reluctantly in 93, he called for an election. And he had his proxy, his friend, run as one of the candidates. And the other guy who ran against him was more popular. His name was M.K.O. Abiola. I wrote about him in The Fisherman. He was an actual character in the novel. So M.K.O. Abiola was the popular choice, and he won the election handily. But the dictator was mad about that, obviously, so he cancelled the election. He annulled it. So that threw the country into a constitutional crisis. So my family felt like we were in danger. So we went to the east, which used to be the Biafran enclave. And that journey would change my life. So it was about a 15-hour journey. So we left very early in the morning, but we got there at night. And the following morning, I remember something, I was about 7 years old or something like that. And, it's a village. It was the first time in a village. In African villages, the community is very close-knit. So everyone knows someone. So people were coming and saying, this person is your relative, this one is an aunt, this one is an uncle. So, but I noticed something. I was kind of a curious kid. Some of the people who were coming to say hello to us had some form of deformity. There was a man who had no limbs. He was in a wheelchair. And he was introduced as some uncle of some kind. Then there was another lady with just one arm. Then there was this young woman, probably in her early 20s or thereabout, whose face scared me. It was half consumed by some strange disease. So I just kept looking at this woman, and I went to my mom and I asked her, I said, Mom, why are these people like this? What happened? Of course I'd seen people like that before, but not in this concentration, in this number. And her response to me, as she used to do at the time, because I asked a lot of questions, was she was obviously very stressed out, and she said to me tersely, Obaga, which translates to, it was a war. And that's the kind of thing that gets sewn into your consciousness. You don't forget that. I knew I wasn't going to get any other answer from her, nor from anyone else. So, but growing up, I kept thinking, what is this war that has left its physical imprints on the people, for my people? And so that led me into basically a lifetime of, anytime I could get a book on Biafra, I read it. I got it, I swallowed it. And so this novel has been in the making for a long time, basically. So at some point during the pandemic in 2020, I realized something. At this point, I'd read over 100 books about Biafra, read a lot of articles, numberless. And what I found surprised me. So there's a lot of accounts, first-hand account from civilians who survived the war. Memoirs, autobiography, historical books. Then you find some books of poetry. You find, obviously, non-fiction, newspaper reportage, New York Times, and all of these things. Then when it comes to fiction, you find a lot of wartime fiction. So I had to make a distinction. Half of a Yellow Sun by Adichie, for instance, is a good example of that. So these are novels that concern themselves not with the fighting. The fighting is in the background, but with the people trying to survive the war. What there's a paucity of that almost you do not find are war novels. And I was surprised by this. Why is everyone afraid of writing about the war, of making it the center of the novel, of work of fiction? And again, I decided to write a word on war. So that is what The Road to the Country is. I think I will read now from the book, and maybe I might circle back to a bit of information later on, and then maybe I would open it up for questions. So, quickly, it follows Kunle, who is, as I said, a law student in Lagos in 1967 at the breakout of the war. He goes into Biafra, he's conscripted. And what happens next is you're going to discover, because I know that the Athenians are generous and everyone here will buy 3 copies of the book. So you will find out. So I'm going to read from chapter 25. At first they do not speak. Kunle and Chinedu take turns gazing at each other and turning away, for it is too much to believe, to understand this great transformation of life. It was not long ago when this man who spoke Yoruba without an accent often sat on Kunle's front porch, singing the songs of Harun and Shola. Now here is the same Chinedu, a veteran of war, a sergeant dressed in tattered uniform. Chinedu's Biafran drill uniform is so worn that Kunle can see through it, and there are holes at the knee of his trousers. Even Chinedu's full-faced grin, revealing his gapped teeth, which he shares with his sisters, Nkechi, Helen, and Ngozika, and their mothers, has changed somewhat. Chinedu kneads his chapped fingers together again and says, between deep sighs, "Wonder shall never end." How can we be here? Says Kunle. That's why I say wonder shall never end. Chinedu shakes his head. It is as if I'm dreaming. Let us go and sit down, and where should we sit? They settle on a bench beneath a camouflaged tent outside the hospital, near where the generator is hidden under a shade cloth. "Goodness me," Chinedu says, mimicking his father. What adventure, Kunle. Kunle nods. I've suffered. I'm telling you, you know me now. I don't usually complain, but what of my brother? How? Yes, oh yes, it is suffering. Just look at me. Chinedu sweeps a hand over himself from his chest to his feet, as if he's not heard the question Kunle had asked, and Chinedu begins telling about how he joined the Biafran army. He was reluctant at first because his brother Nnamdi had joined too. But he's been fighting in the 52nd Brigade under the command of Colonel Ugokwe without break since March. And he was home only the week before. His brigade is stationed on the Owerri Road, blocking any federal attempts to advance from Port Harcourt. Increasingly frustrated at the unsurmountable defensive tactics of the Biafran 52nd Unit, federal troops had set up snipers everywhere. A sniper had shot a bullet through Chinedu's left thigh the day he returned. Chinedu speaks of his wound with great bitterness, for he's eager to return to battle. He is in the middle of his narration when a uniformed man starts the generator, and at once a bright yellow bulb illuminates them. Kunle sees Chinedu's mouth is still moving. I can't hear you, he shouts. So they sit a few meters from Chinedu's wounded friends, where the din of the generator is quieter. The wounded men are in the middle of an excited chatter, with a nurse who is holding up an X-ray sheet and gazing into it with the focused light of a battery torch. She says something in Igbo to a man whose left leg is in a cast up to the knee. Kunle does not need Chinedu to translate, for he can understand most of what the men say now. But Chinedu, nodding towards the fellow, says, "Lucky man, He thought they were going to amputate his arm. Kunle nods. Again, he tries to contain his urgent curiosity about his brother. He does not want to interrupt Chinedu, who is filled with words of the difficult battles, air raids, the famine in Biafra, the silence of the United States, and the support of Britain and other countries for the Nigerian side. There's a hardness in Kunle's voice, in his violent gestures, that scares Kunle, a hardness that has never been there before. For this war to end, Chinedu says, we must win. We must be allowed to have our country. Chinedu has raised his voice, so Kunle nods quickly to relieve his agitation. Why has his friend not mentioned Tunde, his brother, or responded to his question? Is his brother dead? Oh God. What will happen to his parents if this great evil has occurred? Words dance in Kunle's head with troubled feet, and he wants to let them out, but he's afraid of the things that lay yet hidden. Did you know, Chinedu says suddenly, about the seer on Ijoka Road back in Akura? Yes, Baba Igbala, Kunle says urgently. The man came to our house the day I was born. Yes, your mother, your mama, told my mom. You see, that man, if only they allowed him, maybe none of this would have happened. I heard that he had a vision of the war, that he saw everything, every single thing. I don't even know who told me, but they said he knew. Kunle nods. My father told me the seer saw it and told the newspaper people, but nobody believed it. Since he's been here, the nurses and other staff members have been coming up to the wounded men to bring them things or to take them into the hospital to dress their wounds. Now, the young British doctor he saw directing the unloading is helping one of the men with his bandages, covering his belly. Sorry, what am I seeing here? Now the young British doctor he saw directing the unloading is having one of the men with bandages covering his belly stand so that he can administer an injection into the man's bare buttock. As the doctor pulls away the syringe, one of the men says in Igbo, Dr. Phillips, I will surely get you an Igbo wife once the war ends. Kunle laughs with the men, all except Chinedu, whose face does not stir. Your brother, Chinedu says, his voice hurried. He's in our house. Kunle bends forward. Then he sits up again as if struggling against a force pushing at him from behind. The thing of which he wanted to talk about all evening has come, and it seems to him now that he's unprepared for it. The generator stops, and from somewhere a voice shouts, No fuel, no fuel, no fuel, oh. And in the darkness, the world again seems to return to what has so far characterized Biafra, lightless nights. He speaks Igbo now, Chinedu says, almost fluently. Chinedu laughs. When he was a child, his soft, rich laughter had endeared many of the adults in the neighborhood to him. In the months after the accident, he was one of only a few who tried to remain friends with Kunle. Then at age 12, Chinedu was off to boarding school at Igbobi Boys High School in Lagos and came home infrequently. And when he did, he was caught up in books. They are taking care of him. They're trying. But you know his condition. Yes, says Kunle as if compelled. He can feel his breathing steady. Things are hard. You know, Lagos is squeezing us from everywhere. This is a war of genocide. What have we done to deserve all this, eh? Just what? You and I, we grew up together on the same street even. In fact, your mother is Igbo. You know? Chinedu screams again as he repositions the wounded leg closer to his body. Why? Why is all this happening? Kunle has no answer but to nod. What about your sister, he asks. To this, Chinedu is quiet and instead casts his eyes on the ground. When he begins speaking again, his voice is lowered, measured. Early in the year, his sister Nkechi joined an army food drive group that sent food to soldiers at the front. This group often went on off-year attacks, traveling into federal territory to get food that was scarce or unavailable in Biafra. The leader was a 66-year-old woman who had been part of the Women's War in 1929. Everyone had begged Nkechi not to do it, but she continued. They made daring trips, and in March, while supplying the Biafran 58th Brigade at Akwete with food, dried stockfish, rice, milk, beans, the women, about 6 of them, ran into a column of enemy soldiers in 2 jeeps. The soldiers shot the older women and were attempting to capture the 4 younger ones when a single Biafran rifleman on a recce in the area engaged them in a firefight, killing 3 of the federal soldiers from a well-disguised ambush position. In obvious terror of the lone Biafran soldier, the federal commander ordered some of the men to drive away with the captured women, and at this, Nkechi fled into the bush towards the Biafran corporal, who'd been shot in the shoulder. For a whole day, 4 Nigerian soldiers pursued them, and Nkechi and the rifleman hid under the thick bushes, making no noise, eating crackers and pieces of crayfish. Unable to travel faster due to the injury, they spent 2 days in the bush. On one of those nights, delirious with pain and lack of sleep, they had sex and he slept for the first time. The following day, they arrived at a village within Biafran territory. Nkechi famished and exhausted, and the corporal nearly dead. Chinedu falls silent, kneading his hands together and cracking his knuckles, his breathing heavy, as though he's just finished a race. Kunle feels the pain behind the words seep through the air into him. He's surprised when Chinedu continues, his voice harder. Last week I went home, and nobody told me before, nobody. I was surprised to find Nkechi's belly so big, and nobody told me that they brought him to see her parents. Last month, June, when she found out, he paid her dowry. It is the last that they can say. What can be said after this? Is it that a single act, like a shot from a sling, has traveled through their lives, through many years, and has now taken everything away from them? That one act had forced Nkechi, on whom Kunle had pained his young heart, to get attached to his brother, and force his brother in turn to come here. And that same single act has caused him to follow his brother into the most dangerous place in the world. And for what purpose? Why exactly? Nkechi has married another man and is pregnant with the man's child. And what is the fate of his crippled brother? Confined to a wheelchair in a war-torn country, with the people who are not his family. His life condemned to the fate of a ragtag army, whose defeat at the hands of a superior enemy is only a matter of time. Again, why? The answer he sees is him. He is the cause of all this. And all that night he weeps on the ground where he and Chinedu lie down to sleep, hugging himself, watching his shadow on the wall, weeping, his weeping shadow. So, there's another aspect of my writing that I'm going to read from next that you will find in this book. So, those of you who are creative writing students, especially who are interested in fiction, or any of our students who are interested in fiction, and you happen to talk with me at any time, there's something that I will always say to you. I hope that you're not offended by it, because it's something that I truly believe. So I always would say that it's better not to write a book than to write one that is disposable. So what do I mean by this? I don't mean to be harsh. It's because I feel like sometimes there's the instinct to write something that can be forgotten, and I think that it's always good to fight against that. One of the things we do, those of us who mentor people who write, is that we often have the tendency to ask people to engage the reader. Find a way to engage the reader. But I feel like that's a good advice, but it's incomplete. Because it's easy to engage the reader. Just have to be sensational, and the reader will be engaged. But what we don't normally find, and what I think is, for me, is sad, because I do actually read at least a sizable amount of contemporary fiction. A couple of years ago, I was lucky enough to judge the Booker Prize, which I read about 200 books that year. And they were very good books. They were already selected by the publishers. And every year I get a couple of books that are coming out, publishers send to me, to read. So I have a good sense of what is being published. And so I find that most of the books that I read, once you're done with the books, you don't remember them. And this is not a good thing. I think that what you want to do is to write a book or even a short story that, after you're done with it, it stays with you. How do you make fiction that lingers in the mind? Days, weeks, months, even years. That is, I think, what one should aim for. So this is not to say that I actually achieve that, but at least it's an aim that I try my best to have at the back of my mind when I write. So I feel like a way to do that is to try to develop a sort of a unique voice, cultivate a sort of a garden where you plant something that might be a variant of tomatoes and pepper, and that unique voice can come in a variety of ways. You have to work hard at it. For me, I think what I try to do is to blend a sort of realism and the mystical, not the magical, but the mystical. By the mystical, I mean that there's no magic, there's no floating, flying human beings or floating, anything. But there's a dimension that is spiritual, that hovers over characters, over their actions. The chief, for instance, in an orchestra of minorities, the main character is unaware of the presence of the spirit. So his actions can be rationalized as what anybody can do. But you cannot divorce that from the fact that the person telling his story is a spirit that indwells him. The same thing with the fisherman. I had this very funny argument with this guy who is a professor in Denmark, and he writes articles on my work. I don't know why he does that, but he told me, he said, I wouldn't read, of course I'm not insane to read an article about my work, but he's become a friend, so I had to read one of his stuff. And it was about magical realism in my work. And I laughed. So I said to him, Anderson, hey, can you show me any magical action in this book? What do you mean by magical realism? And he looked, and he said, seriously, is that, you're right, I can't find any magical event here. So there's none. There's a prophecy, it's a spoken word that is energized by some mystical energy that leads to the unraveling of this family. So that's what I try to do. So in this book, all of this is to say that there's a second main character through whose eyes we'll see the entire story of the novel unfold. He's a seer who sees into the future. So the entire narrative present of the novel is actually one night, an 8-hour period where this guy is privy in 1947, before Nigeria is even independent. He witnesses the vision of this war. And so we are in 1947, but then we get access to 1967 to 70 when the war actually takes place. So that by the time the novel ends, the seer himself begins to doubt his vision. Because when he walks out from the mountain, from the vision, the Union Jack is floating everywhere. In fact, there's a new post office being built by the British colonial authority. So, but he's just witnessed a war that unravels the country. So the reason for this is to couch the entire story of the war, almost like a prophetic warning. So something that even though we know reading is a historical fact, it's actually happened. But when you read the book, it feels like something that can still be prevented, almost like a warning. So I will read for the next 8 minutes or so the end of the novel, where the seer has ended his vision and has gone to deliver the prophecy of the war. I'm going to take the questions. The seer's heart is heavy as he watches the man holding the child, his body rocking with white sobs. The child's face is spotlit in the vision, as if all of the world has been reduced to just this one face, on which is writ the naked eloquence of loss. The unborn man is speaking, summoning his beloved out of the impossible darkness of death. And he's telling her not to linger much in the plains, to tell their stories in the carnival of stories, and that once she's done, to head straight to the hills of the ancestors for rest. Please, do not linger, he begs, as we do not know when we will retrieve your body. He's saying this in a voice too loud for the night, and the child watching with silent fear as he calls her name again and again. Aggie, Aggie, Aggie. Now the waters go dark, and the blackness, like that during the moment when the unborn man was being transmitted into the afterlife. The seer looks up and sees that the star has broken out from its space and is slowly sinking downward, a sign that a child is about to be born. He must end the vision, for one cannot look into the future of a person who is already born. If one forbids it. So he begins his incantations, his voice as low as he can keep it. But it is necessary to take permission from Ifa to end the vision. So his voice went snake-like through the path of mystical melody until he crests the summit of his intercession. He dips his hands into the water, and in the moment, an electric shock grips him as if he would faint. A cascade of images erupt in the screen of Ifan's waters. He hears the howling of voices, the soft drawn-out whispers of unseen people, the rattling of metallic objects, the indistinct sounds that will not cease. His fingers reach for the amulet, and with one quick pull, he draws it out of the water. So here comes the very end of the novel. So this is after he's given the prophecy to the parents of the boy, who is Kule, who is just about to be born. Now, the Kule is the soldier whom we read about just a moment ago. With a gentle but concerted push, she closes the door. Nibala turns around, facing the horizon towards the east, where there's a yellow where there's a yellow streak of dawnlight, a shadow of the sun in its early emergence. But the star is gone. It occurs to him that this is the first fulfillment of what is to come, and that it has happened exactly as Ifa had revealed it. He has seen much. He has witnessed the destruction of a nation of people. How will he keep the same? For how long can he carry his body alone? He looks up and the horizon has returned to itself, adorned in bright light as though the long night that came before was itself a dream. The world asleep before is now awake and is teeming with earthly susurrations and voices, and the machinery of life is spinning its wheels. Like a merciless stream, life will flow on, carrying in it the yawning joy of birth and the sorrowful howling of dying. There will be laughter and tears, remembrance and forgetting, pride and shame, silence and noise, and lost in the thrill of it. Most people will not look beneath its surface. Even the curious who do look will not see the grave thing that has descended amongst them, biding its time. Every day the fearful stream will continue its interminable flow, bearing within it the terrible secret vision, so that when the day to be feared arrives, it will be as though a thing unwelcomed has entered the midst of an unsuspecting gathering, unseen, and as such, it will be too late to stop it. Thank you.